there, and welcome to another episode of the Music Minds podcast. My name is Tony Fennell, and joining me from beautiful and sunny Brooklyn, New York City is my co-host, John Stone. How the devil are you, mate?
Hanging in there. Happy Labor Day weekend.
That's right.
Nice and temperate weather down here, so I'm not sweating like a pig, at least for the time being.
I'll get you going, John. I promise you. This show is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
Today's show is called Ed Sheeran and Eminem, Two Sides of the Same Coin. Mm-hmm. He may be one of the world's biggest grossing artists out there on the touring circuit, as well as selling units right now. But Ed Sheeran is locked in a serious battle following allegations that he's guilty of stealing other people's music for his own songs. Oh, boy. This is nothing new for the pop star, John. He's already been sued as we speak for his supposed use of a Marvin Gaye track. But in this latest suit, an unknown musician has taken aim at him for his songwriting process in general. Writer Sam Chokri has brought Sheeran to court, alleging that as a writer he is, quote, consciously or subconsciously in the habit of appropriating the compositional skill and labor of other songwriters, end quote.
That's pretty much to chew there.
Right? In layman's terms, he likes to rip off other people's work. Did I just say that? Oh, okay.
I think so.
Right. Well, Chokri is going after Sheeran and his 2017 number one hit, Shape of You, and claims that the chorus of the song is taken from his own 2015 song, Oh Why. It doesn't end there. He also believes that Sheeran's catalogue includes quite a few stolen parts of music recorded by artists such as TLC, Shaggy, and American country singer Jasmine Ray. Because of the complaint/lawsuit, Sheeran, and here we go, will not be seeing any royalty payments till the court makes a decision on the case. Enter Sheeran's countersuit. He's looking to recoup any lost profits and seeking compensation and damages for his reputation, sorry. You and I both know, John, this has got nasty written all over it, right? I mean, this isn't going to end well. Let's not forget that this case comes hot on the heels of Sheeran being sued by Ed Townsend, the co-writer of Marvin Gaye's 1973 song, Let's Get It On, who says Sheeran used the same harmonic progressions and rhythmic elements in his 2014 track, Thinking Out Loud. He was also, by the way, this is Sheeran, he was also sued in 2017 over his song Photograph, and that cost him a hefty $20 million to settle. Now, this should be right up your alley, John. So, what do you make of all of this, my friend? Woo, this is going to get ugly.
This is what musicologists were made for.
Yes, sir.
Because you have to look at what he's done with it, what he's taken from these other songs, or if he has taken something from these other songs, and just how much of that is influencing what his song is and what his recording is versus what was originally used. And this touches a lot of other places as well, because there are other lawsuits out there. As we remember, Blurred Lines and the Marvin Gaye estate with his song Gotta Give It Up. And there's another one out there, Stairway to Heaven, which the band Spirit, one is saying that sampled or took pieces of their song Taurus as the opening segment, a very, very iconic segment of that song. So there's a lot of people suddenly saying, wait a minute, after 30, 40 years, saying, hey, wait a minute, I think they took something from me. And I think you can thank or blame the Marvin Gaye estate for starting this hopefully not avalanche of lawsuits for people trying to suddenly reclaim music that they think someone else is using without permission. So,
the one thing about Ed Sheeran, John, and I'm a songwriter myself, there is a pattern that goes on here with Ed Sheeran. And look, he's a clever guy. He's a clever guy. And look, I wouldn't cry too many tears for this guy. I mean, he's just ended his recent tour, and it's the highest grossing music tour of all time, making, you ready for this, an estimated $775 million in revenue.
Wow.
Proper money, but, there does seem to be a pattern with Ed Sheeran. Is he the whipping boy? You tell me.
Well, look, he's stepped into it himself. Okay, at the end of the day, you have to look at what is he doing. And again, we talked about this in the Fair Use podcast, Tony. I never understand why people go and say, "Oh, there's something. Let me use that," as opposed to just coming up to something. You can find things that sound like it, feel like it. We talked about that feel element that is in the song that makes it unique. You can do something that says, "Okay, I like the way that feels." So when you talk talking about Blurred Lines. Supposedly Robin Thicke said, "Ooh, I love that song of Marvin Gaye's. We should do something like that." It's just come up with your own stuff. You're inspired by it. Find your own way. There are a lot of notes to use. There are a lot of rhythms to use. You can pretty much pick them all out on your own, but somehow these people just decide, hey, I'm going to take that piece and go with it. So Ed Sheeran, yeah, he really got it. With Photograph, absolutely. I mean, he completely ripped off Matt Cardle's song Amazing from 2012, and of course it cost him $20 million, which is very nice. Now look, what he did was apparently he lifted 39 notes or 70% from the chorus of Amazing for the chorus of his song Photograph. 39 notes. Now what's he ripping off? Matt Cardle or Gilbert and Sullivan? I mean, how many songs have 39 notes in their chorus anyway? But that's really saying, okay, I'm just going to basically grab this and run with it and hope for the best. I think Sam Chokri is performing as Sammy Switch. I think he has a complaint too, because OY, his song, he uses this same inflection, the same pattern, OY, OY, O, as the hook in Shape of You. So I think he's going to be able to nail him as well. What that does, though, is it opens up a lot of, and these are, by the way, these are melodic pieces. Now, we talked about this again before. You can only copyright a melody and words. That's what words and music are. So I think a lot of these people, especially the people like Ed Sheeran and stuff, they look at a song or they hear a song and they go, okay, I'm going to grab the non-copyrightable pieces of that and sort of reinterpolate them and incorporate them into my stuff, and I should be able to get away with it because, again, you can only copyright a melody or a lyric from the publishing side. On the recording side, obviously the master recording is what's copyrighted. So I think they really do sort of get this sense that I'm being, inspired by this, and therefore I can sort of grab it and do my own thing with it. And I think what you're seeing from this is Ed Sheeran's got this bad reputation. He's lost. By the way, now that he's off tour, he says he's going to go quiet for 18 months. I think he just needs to sort of settle down and go, okay, what else is out there that I'm going to have to worry about getting sued on? You have to review his entire catalog, But yeah, he's really, unfortunately for him, because he kind of screwed this up, he lost that lawsuit over Photograph. He's getting sued again. Now, I'm going to come out on a limb here and say that I don't believe this new one with the song Let's Get It On and Thinking Out Loud. I don't feel that one is as good and solid a case as Blurred Lines. I feel that, yes, it is a rhythmic pattern that's used, but the melodies are completely different. The feel is completely different. Yeah, he's hitting those, little touches and stuff. And if you overlap the two different melodies, you really can't tell that much of a difference. But this is not such a unique, non-lyrical or non-melodic piece of a song. Now, you can, in some cases, and let's use the example of Money by Pink Floyd. That bass line is absolutely unique. So if you ever use that in something else, of course you could grab it. Even if we wanted to talk about Led Zeppelin, like Whole Lotta Love, that guitar riff, that's absolutely, you would recognize that anywhere. This pattern that is used in this song, sure, it does sound similar, but is it making the song? Is it the essence of the song? The song is his melody and his lyrics and such. So I am going to go out on a limb, and I think that it's not going to happen. Now, also think about that I don't believe the estate is going to win this one.
I don't think so. I don't think so either. You know what? The bottom line is with Marvin Gaye, there are a billion songs out there that have that lilt. It's a tip of the hat, and I've said this. Before, talking to songwriting friends of mine. It's very, very difficult. That kind of Marvin Gaye sound, and there's certain chords that you play, and it's just you're not even necessarily trying to rip off anything that Marvin's done. It's just you play a certain chord, and it's like, that's Marvin Gaye. His melodies are more iconic than the chords.
Absolutely.
That's where we get into trouble with all of this. I mean, I've written songs, and this is subconsciously. I've written songs where I've sat down, I've finished it, I've gone, that is kick ass. And then I've realized, that's because it's a Marvin Gaye song. And I'm realizing, oh dear me, that's why. So you put it on the scrap heap and go, I'll just learn the chords to whatever, to Mercy, Mercy Me. But I mean, there are only a certain amount of chords, and it's really how you interpret them. Mm-hmm. It's a tough one, John.
No, it is, and when you talk about the money involved, especially with Mr. Sheeran, who basically has a license to print cash, as you like to say, just in alone, thinking out loud, just on views on YouTube, 2.8 billion. Okay,
wow.
So that's actually proper money from them because as we know, YouTube does not pay that much. But when you get to that number of volume, you're sure going to get some money from that. So I can see why somebody might say, and if you're Marvin Gaye's estate, or in this case Ed Townsend, who co-wrote that song with him, sure, you're going to look at it and go, you know what? What the heck? Let's take a flyer. We won the last one, which I think was absolutely proper. Behind Blurred Lines, I mean, they basically just lifted the rhythm section of that song and just put something else over the top. And another piece on this suit with Ed Townsend against Ed Sheeran, the Eds. This is interesting because this suit went through the process and was decided against the estate. And then they went and appealed and said that there were improper instructions to the jury. So they've retried it. And now it is in the judge's hands. And the judge is waiting to hear the result of the Stairway to Heaven lawsuit because I think he doesn't want to have this responsibility on himself. Now, going to the Stairway to Heaven lawsuit, I do feel there is certainly a very clear reference to the Taurus song, the opening piece of that Jimmy Page plays at the beginning of Stairway to Heaven. Is it enough? Are you talking about something that's so iconic, and then certainly in the case of Stairway to Heaven it is, but is what was in the Taurus, because it's not the exact same notes, it is following the same pattern, and it's doing this descending, I believe it's a descending chromatic figure that he's doing. So, but again, just like you said, there's only so many notes, there's only so many things you can do, and I think you had said this, Tony, they had actually been out on tour together, Zeppelin and this band?
Zeppelin actually opened up. I mean, I'll show you how long ago it was. Zeppelin opened up for them. And it's actually, the actual track, Taurus, is an instrumental. Right. So, and you can't help but think, look, again, if we're going on past history, Zeppelin like to lift a tune or two.
Right. Yes.
And I'm being kind. But you can't help but think that Page heard that and went, I like that. And Jimmy Page was the session guy. It's not like some guy was struggling to work those chords out. If anybody could work it out, it would be someone like Jimmy Page. And probably subconsciously, he's hearing that in soundcheck. He's hearing it at night, and he's going,
let me do something. Let me do something with that,
Yeah. Hey, Robert, what about this progression? And then Plant takes over, and then before you know it, the song has got its own wings and it's started to fly. But I can't help but think that Jimmy, in his maybe in a drunken stupor, went,
if only that.
Right. Well, there you go. But yeah, I mean, I think they've got to. I don't know, man. And I'm a Zeppelin fan, a massive Zeppelin fan. But I think the band spirit. There's a reason why this is taking so long. That's for certain.
Yes, and I think there's a reason why judges are sort of ping-ponging back and forth, going, "Well, you make the call. You make the call."
Yeah, that's right, John.
And again, we talked about this before when we were talking about fair use. It depends on the judge. It depends on the court. Is it somebody who's going to be on the side of original copyright, of original creators, or is it going to be on the side of business as usual, or, boys will be boys, or musicians and writers will be writers, and this type of thing is just part of the, at some point is part of the zeitgeist. Is it enough that you have created something so unique or so iconic that you can just basically say, it can't help but influence other music and other things down the line. Now, back in those days, obviously, Spirit was not something that everybody was like, oh my God, they're the greatest thing ever. But it clearly seeped into Jimmy Page's mind and helped to create this other song. So at this point, so far down the road, and again, I think we can go back to the Marvin Gaye estate and say, well, you opened Pandora's box here, pardon the expression. Now, and I think there's a little segue into our next segment. You open this door. Now everybody's going to start flooding through. And who's going to be the one to say, you know what? It really has to, because we're now no longer talking about melody and lyric, which are really
right.
the only two original pieces that you could really go after. And in certain cases, very, very specific pieces of rhythmic progression or chords or what have you, or a bass line or something like that. But it really is only supposed to be those two pieces. So if you really start opening that door, or you go through that door and everybody starts saying, well, you ripped me off and you ripped me off. I mean, look, Lady Gaga ripped off Madonna for her song Born This Way.
Oh,
all right.
Sure.
I mean, that was a straight, I can still not understand how that didn't turn into a lawsuit of some sort. It seemed like Lady M was like, well, whatever, go ahead and do it.
No,
but,
I agree. I got a question for you, John, that you might be able to answer. Is the fact that Ed Sheeran's publishing has now been put on hold? I mean, he's not getting it. He's getting no residuals at this point. It's like until we sort this out, you're getting nothing. That didn't happen to Zeppelin, right? With regards to Stairway, I think Ed, and this is where I go back to Ed being a bit of a whipping boy. I think he's getting a smack in the jaw because he's a nice guy and he's made a lot of money. You know, I think Zeppelin are such a machine that the recording industry decided, well, better not. But Ed Sheeran's this little red-headed kid with glasses. Let's have a crack at this kid.
It's harder to punch granddad than your snotty little cousin.
Oh, nice. We're talking to snotty little cousins. What about Eminem? Sorry, did I just say that?
Wow, that's quite a segue.
Woohoo! So what's going on there, John?
Oh, boy. Well, this one's very interesting. And so now this is we're doing a 180 from where we were, which is you took my song and did something new with it, and therefore I need to get a piece, to you took my song and have been exploiting it for forever and somehow believe that you don't have to pay me because of some crazy ideas. And also the publisher for Eminem is basically challenging this new piece of legislation that's passed that was signed by our dear leader, President Trump, the Music Modernization Act last year, which Cobalt, who is the publisher of Eminem's music, is basically saying that there's a constitutionality issue with this law, which I find very interesting. Once I started digging into this, it was like, that is a little strange for sure. So basically what Eminem, and actually Eminem himself is not involved, it's his publisher that's doing this.
So hang on, he's got nothing to do with this.
Well, he's not driving the bus. He's not the plaintiff. They're using it because obviously people like us go, hey, ooh, Eminem, as opposed to, ooh, 8 Mile Music or 8 Mile Style Music or Cobalt Music Publishing.
Listen,
go to sleep, you know?
Right. I'm sure Eminem's not driving the bus, but I'll guarantee he's putting the gas in the car.
He is putting the gas in the car. Absolutely.
I'll tell you that.
He rented it for sure. So this lawsuit is against Spotify, which is the big streaming platform.
Yeah.
And what they're basically saying, this is Cobalt 8 Mile Style Music, is that they have not paid sufficient royalties to stream Eminem's music. And what they've only done, and according to this suit, is they've made, quote, random payments of some sort, which only purport to account for a fraction of those streams of over 200 Eminem songs that are currently streaming on this site. So it's interesting because everybody hates the streaming platforms. Everybody believes they're being underrepresented and underpaid for what's going on. The royalty rates are terrible. It's very hard to follow. And a big piece of this, I think, is that even when Spotify pays, how do you audit this? How do you go and say, wait a minute, you have to tell us exactly how many streams? Many of them don't share this information. You and I were talking earlier about this. iTunes isn't going to tell you how many downloads they have. They're not going to tell you all that. That's proprietary information as far as they're concerned, because there's no oversight on this. It's simply deals being made, and you have to buy into it or you don't, pardon the expression. So this is where they're really feeling that Spotify is not being an honest partner, a honest player in this. And particularly one thing that they've claimed, Spotify, is that they don't know who the copyright holders are for certain songs, including Lose Yourself. For heaven's sakes, Eminem's song Lose Yourself, it's like the biggest song he ever put out. And
Good
so
Lord.
Those are now subject to something called copyright control. Now, that doesn't sound very good, does it? By the way, I went on 5 minutes. 5 minutes, I found the three writers of that song, Lose Yourself. I found all the publishers of that song. I don't know where they can be claiming this. So what copyright control is It actually originated, thanks Tony, in the UK.
You know
with MCPS. And basically what they said, MCPS said, is that if a composition had not been registered with them so that they could collect royalties, mechanical royalties in this case, which is for sound recordings and publishing for the sound recordings, then they would hold those royalties until the appropriate party, either the writer or publisher, claimed them. So that, as the U.S., of course, we don't do things normally. So we sort of transmogrified that in the United States, which basically says, if I don't know who to pay, I'm going to hold on to the money and they have to come and find it. So that's what copyright control basically is.
I can remember signing my first publishing deal. And that was explained to me then. And I was like, yeah, cool. Give me the 10 grand. It didn't matter. You know,
Sure.
and I, before we move on here, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm sure it's something you're going to answer later on. But doesn't Eminem have the right to say to Spotify, that's it, you're not going to play it anymore. I'm done. I'm taking my 200 Eminem songs that you're playing on your site, and you cannot play them anymore.
Well, you can, and some people do. I know a few people that have gone out and made that, taken on that battle, but that's a hard road to hoe. And again, you're looking at one of the main ways to consume music. Is it worth it? You know, again, is it worth getting some crumbs from the table or starving underneath?
But here we go,
you know?
and this is what gets my goat. Does he need the money? Could he be the guy who turns around and goes, come join me. We are not going to put up with this anymore. It's off. It's done.
Well, and this lays in because them saying, somehow Spotify saying we can't find the writers or the licensing parties for this is such nonsense that they're basically calling them out and saying, how can you claim something that's stupid? And then on top of it, it's really more about getting more control of these statements and the payments that come in and you know, transparency. That's, I think, what Cobalt is really seeking here, because they just don't feel that they get paid the adequate amount, and there's no way to force it unless you want to start a real war, which is what, you know, it sounds like they're trying to do. So when you flip that, then they're also their argument against the Music Modernization Act, and we'll talk a little bit on this. We'll talk about this again later on, but we have to sort of dress this up, folks, because if you looked at this and said, oh, they're going to talk about the Music Modernization Act, I mean, maybe you could use that as something to fall asleep to, but it's boring. It's boring. It's legislation. I fall asleep in the meetings when they talk about this stuff. So basically what happened was that this piece of legislation, the Music Modernization Act, was basically created so that you could get better well, I'll give you the pieces of it. So the digital database of songs, writers, and publishers for mechanical licensing. So it's basically creating an umbrella organization that can handle all of those rights, particularly for streaming platforms. Right now, there's a company that's now controlled by CSAC, one of the PROs here in the United States, Performing Rights Organizations, the Harry Fox Agency, and they used to do this for independents. The majors, Sony, Warner, BMG, the bigs, Universal, they do this internally. They have their own setups for this. But independent publishers like Cobalt and such, including my company that I work for, we used and still do Harry Fox. And Harry Fox built a database that gave you all the information. You could go into them, you could sign up, get mechanical license for any number of units and pay that royalty, and you'd be done with it, and you have the right to then distribute your record or your stream or something like that.
They're basically a collection agency, right, John?
A collection agency. They're a society, an organization, company that was set up so that you can have independent publishers, give them the right to license for them. They take a little commission off the top and go from there. So that's one piece of the MMA, as we call it, which is not to be mistaken with mixed martial arts fighting, which is much more exciting, and probably makes more money too. This also makes the Copyright Royalty Board, they must consider free market conditions. Right now, they consider rates that are already set by the government or by societies like BMI and ASCAP, et cetera. So they make it more of a free market situation for setting rates for these types of things. Any disputes are now set by a random selection of federal court judges. I told you this was boring, folks. Instead of one person who might have their own biases, like we were talking about previously, you want to have an opportunity to get in front of different judges who may interpret things better or worse for you. And finally, the performing rights societies and songwriters, they can now use a broader range of considerations in performing performance royalty dispute. So if they're fighting with somebody, there are a lot more things that they can take into consideration as opposed to just using a system of statutory rates only. So this is a little bit like number 2 on the list.
It sounds to me like they're trying to do the right thing.
Right. But, of course, there's always a but. There's always a but. So the problem is the MMA also includes a provision that makes it extremely difficult for copyright owners, and this is where Cobalt's upset for Eminem. It makes it very difficult for copyright owners who failed to file a lawsuit over royalties prior to December 31st, 2017 to seek legal remedies. Now, what Cobalt's saying is, wait a minute, why are we allowing a piece of legislation to deny us the right to defend our copyright? Sometimes you don't find out about infringements for years later, and you have to have something to be able to do. So why is it now everything has to be dumped into this rate court, as they call it, to be able to settle these things? I think you're depriving people their rights.
Who set the December 31st, 2017 date? Who set that?
Well, this was set with this legislation. So what's funny about that is that when they first started out, this was dominated by the major publishers. So again, we're talking about Warner Brothers, we're talking about Sony, we're talking about BMG, we're talking about Universal. So the big four, as they're called, really dominate, and they're about 80-85% of the industry, or maybe a little less. So they were the ones who were really driving the bus on this. They were the ones who worked with the NMPA, which is the National Music Publishers Association, to craft this legislation. They also worked with some members of the Hill, a representative actually local here in Brooklyn. Hakeem Jeffries was a driver on this, some folks in the Senate as well. This was actually a very bipartisan piece of legislation, shocking here in the United States. And they worked together to create this. Now, what they did was, they said, there's going to be this big pile of money. We need to know how to allocate it. So the majors hired Harry Fox. Harry Fox said, okay, we will go ahead. Now, Harry Fox, God bless him, they are not the end-all be-all on this, and they have a lot of holes in their data and gaps in their data, and there's a lot of issues and such. So essentially, they went in and they said, well, we can match songs to publishers or writers, and they wound up matching 15%.
Wow.
Of those songs. Isn't that interesting? Because wait, what do these four majors control? 85%? Guess where most of that money went? Split between the four majors.
Of course it is.
All right, so a lot of these people who are represented by indies were not too pleased about that, and in fact, some people that I know were not. So this piece of legislation, it's trying to do the right thing to a certain extent, of course, but at the end of the day, it's still controlled by big corporate interests. Again, folks, I'm not one of those socialists. Don't come screaming at us about that. But it's controlled by the people that stand to make the most from it, and it will codify this and hopefully give some more power to everybody. But it's going to be parsed out, piece by piece to those who have the most stake in it and the most interest and the most money. So, the rich get richer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's an interesting piece, and I think Eminem has a lot. He will look at this, and I'm sure Cobalt has his blessing on this, obviously. But this is getting to the heart of when you try and fix something that is broke, is it the best way to fix it? Are you just throwing something together just to make it look good, or are you actually trying to delve into the deep, dark parts and say, well, this is what we really need to do? And at some point, when is it economically viable to do that?
Well, I mean, both of these stories are absolutely going to set a precedent. That's for certain. I mean, they're both big ones. I've been watching Ed Sheeran for quite a while, and he is a smart writer. He's great with melody, and it didn't hurt that he went on tour with Taylor Swift. He literally was like a redheaded stepchild, literally. And it was like the kid at the school. You were like, who the hell is that kid? He has.
How did he get to go out with her?
Let's not ask. That probably cost him some money as well. But it changed his life. And as regards to Eminem, he's a superstar anyway. John, as always,
sure.
You're a wealth of knowledge. I can't stop it. Every week I'm going, I've just learned something else. And here's me thinking,
so did I.
Well, I come here prepared, and I'm listening to you, and I go, I know nothing. I really do. But again, John, as always, man, you're a brilliant co-host. For everybody out there listening today, please like and subscribe. And for those of you who want to find out some more info about us, come and see us at www.musicmindspodcast.com. Mr. Stone, take care, my friend.
Mr. Fennell, you as well. Thanks so much, and have a great holiday.